Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. I'm Stephanie Edmonds. Welcome to Teaching Liberty. To live free, you have to think free. And I have a man who is spreading a lot of free thought out there through a free press, the Connecticut Inside Investigator. I have with me the managing editor, Connor Drigotas. He is also a father and a patriot and somebody who I have the honor of being right here in the state of Connecticut with. So thank you so much for joining me, Connor.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to be here.
And thank you to everybody out there who is checking in. Make sure you've hit that like button. If you're just finding your way here, subscribe to the channel. And we want to know what you're thinking. So if you're here live, join in. We'll try to bring in your comments as we go. Or if you're checking the replay, let us know your thoughts in those comments down below. All right. So, we always hear about fake news, and I've tweeted more than once how much the media not just hates you, but like actively derides us and tries to divide us. And, it's hard out here to figure out what is real, what is fake, what's the truth, who should we listen to? But there is good media out there. There are some people who are actually doing real journalism. And by real journalism, I mean like getting out there and investigating issues and not simply just seeing, okay, what did the AP put out? What did Reuters put out? And like, how can we just read off their press release and put our little, left or right bias on it? So tell me about Connecticut Inside Investigator and, how you guys came up with the idea and some of the amazing work you've been doing.
Yeah. I mean, geez. All right. So we have an hour. So I'll just start talking and then I'll just go for an hour if that's the prompt. There's a
Yeah,
lot
I'll probably ask you some questions here, stop you, like get into some stuff, and like I would love for you to share some specific stories to exemplify some of the nice things you're going to tell us. So
No, I appreciate it. And I really, I appreciate you drawing the distinction between journalism and media, because media really, I mean, heck, let's go to the movie theater, right? I mean, Netflix is media. But what we do at Inside Investigator is journalism, which means we are trying to actually share information that is relevant, that is timely, that is fact checked. And really what we're trying to do specifically in our newsroom is cover stories that other outlets can't or won't. And we're trying to do it in such a way that it provides you not just what happened, but some of our investigations are upwards of 6,000 words. So we are doing everything in our power to make sure that when someone walks away from an investigation, they really have a great understanding of what happened and why it matters. Which, in my opinion, man, isn't that the whole point? If journalism isn't useful, then why are you reading it? You only got so much time. Go do something better than read the news.
right, right. And just the human side of it too, right? We read so many articles that are just some opinion guy or just some reporter reading a news, and they might have their expert or their researchers, right? Or some person who works for some fancy think tank or organization. But what you guys do a lot is like actually get out there and talk to the real people who these issues are really impacting. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, one of our taglines is journalism by humans for humans, which is something that, yes, it's a pithy little line that we could throw out there, but internally it's kind of a mantra. It's something that we really use in our editorial process to make sure that at the end of the day, every story that we write is about and or influences or impacts a real human being. And you can't discount that, especially when you're putting something out into the world that could have negative consequences or hopefully positive consequences. But in either case, there are ripple effects that go out into the world when we tweet, when we write, when we do journalism. I mean, that's the human experience. And we need to be really aware of that in journalism, especially if you're holding anytime you're holding the megaphone out in the world, that comes with a great power and great responsibility.
Well, it's good to hear people, you really take to heart that responsibility. You know, like so often it just feels like people are out here trying to spin narratives. But I guess that's also has to do with sort of the nationalization of our political conversation. And what I'm trying, you know, I'm always having that struggle myself between covering like, okay, what's trending right now on, you know, YouTube or Twitter, so I can try to drive traffic and like build a broad base and stuff like that. But at the same time, I really do believe that local politics, state politics is actually how we are going to uh, change the direction and try to overcome this divide that we have right now in our country. And so, but you guys are also like relatively new to the space. So, can you talk a little bit about what it's like to break into the industry, like the news industry, and what it takes and what you guys have really done to build yourself up? And I don't know, was there like a certain story? Was there like just like a certain dynamic to the team, a certain reporter that you got? You know, if I'm, and you know, I'm out here also trying to do the independent media thing as my own creator. So how did you do it?
I guess like most good ideas, necessity is the mother of invention. So Connecticut's in a unique spot, or maybe unfortunately not so unique now, but we recognized back. So we just celebrated our 2-year second birthday, as we put it. So back at the end of 2021, there's a gentleman by the name of Mark Fitch. He's a senior investigative reporter on our team, and me and him we think of each other as co-founders, really, of this project. And he was writing for an organization called Yankee Institute, which is a free market think tank. And he's a tremendous writer. He's a genuinely good guy. He's also a fantastic horror novelist, which a lot of people don't know about him. But he was starting to receive news and investigative tips to his inbox that were not relevant to his job. I mean, Yankee Institute's a policy organization, so investigative journalism, unless it's related to the policy, he's not writing about it. On the backdrop, though, Connecticut has lost 50% of its newsrooms since 2004. So there is a massive drop-off in quality information being delivered to the people of Connecticut. So I was working at the time for a law firm in Pennsylvania, and I had spoken with Mark and some of the Yankee folks before, and the idea was floated, what if we created this independently managed newsroom where these tips and the many, many more tips that are not able to be or are not for some unknown reason being explored by other media outlets, let's set you guys loose on this. There's no shortage of stories to be told. There's no shortage of work to be done. Why don't you all get busy? So starting in April of 2022, we launched InsideInvestigator.org, and we surrounded ourselves with an ideologically diverse team of reporters and now support staff. So we have a full-time digital director. We have 4 full-time reporters. And really what we've been able to do in the last 2 years is chase down corruption. That's our mission, is we want to root out corruption in the state of Connecticut through the power of investigative journalism. And that's what we get to do for 40 to, I don't know, 80 or 100 hours each week. I mean, we really try to throw it all at the wall there, while also making sure that our people are fresh and dedicated. I mean, as the managing editor, I don't write investigations, which, my job is in many ways just to make the trains run on time. But one of my favorite parts about the job is our reporters get to write what moves them, because if they're happy and they're passionate about what they're writing, that's going to show through, and our quality is going to be better, which in a world of cheap clicks and trying to get the audience and chase the next thing, we're a nonprofit. So we've intentionally tried to break away from that and say, it's not about clicks. It's about quality. It's about story selection. It's about doing something that, like I said before, if it isn't top tier, we've missed the mark, and we need to learn and become better.
And I think that long term, that type of work will pay off, right? The cheap clicks and what's trending, I mean, it's changing all the time. And we can see the old media, the legacy media, it's dying out, right? You can look all, I think The Intercept is having funding problems. The Washington Post is having funding problems. And they're propped up by billionaires, not even by these clicks, It's so, um, and then the other thing I think that in this cheap click thing that we've lost is they actually just end up driving the like whatever the government wants to do instead of holding our politicians accountable, right? They end up just like co-opting one side's narrative or the other side's narrative, or just saying, oh, those guys are bad, oh, versus actually doing what the media is supposed to do, right? Being the fourth branch of our government. And yeah, so I said I think long term that type of stuff is really gonna pay off. Can you give us an example of a story that you've done that really shows off your reporting style, and then the impact it's had either politically on the state legislature, or maybe on a locality, or just culturally, right? Because we talk about politics, but really politics follows culture. So if we can impact the culture, that's almost more important.
Yeah. Let me, if you don't mind, can I go back to something just about legacy
Oh
media?
yeah, please.
I don't want to be in the business of trashing on others, because I see reporters who we talk to. I mean, when people apply for our jobs, they're struggling. It's because these people are burned out. But it was about 2 years ago, I was sitting in the hotel in Hartford with our digital director. We were having dinner kind of after one of our kickoff events, and we're sitting there, and the TV's up in the hotel lobby, and we're brand new to the news scene. We're the new kids on the block. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do. And as we're both sitting there, his name's Joe. He's a fan. He does all of our visual design, manages our website. He's a tremendous asset. We're looking up, and they say, hey, coming up, news at 11, here are our top 5 stories. And 3 of them are just the names of people who have been murdered in the last weekend. Like that. Fear is a powerful motivator, and I understand why people go for that. And if it bleeds, it leads. That's a really powerful movement. It's human emotion that can be harnessed. But I think that needs to be separated from the true drive of the fourth estate, as you're talking about, providing good information, reliable, helpful information. The 99% of headlines that you see in a day, they're not useful to you. They're from across the world or across the country or even across the state. They're not going to change the way that you live your life. And that's a good indication that, we talk about changing one's media diet. Eat your fruits and veggies, get the quality stuff, fuel your system.
I'm on the carnivore diet, so I would say get your high quality meat in, not that McDonald's.
100%. So I wanted to throw that in there, but yes, I would love to brag about our team. Specifically, I think one of the best ones that I love to talk about is a troubled shelter for teen girls in Harwinton, Connecticut, that Mark Fitch wrote about in September of 2023. It was titled Grave Concern, a DCF-funded shelter for teen girls loses control. And this was an investigation. Harwinton's a small town, 5,500 people or so. And his story looked into the physical, sexual abuse that was happening, missing girls, stolen vehicles, melees. At one point, the first selectman was emailing because they were out of ambulances for the town. It was really, really just a traumatic situation, not just for these girls who are trying to turn their lives around, but because of the impact it was having on the community. And, it set off a firestorm. The story received coverage in almost every outlet in the state after Mark released this investigation. There were multiple arrests, several lawsuits. The DCF commissioner resigned shortly thereafter. And most importantly, the home was closed, meaning that these girls were moved to places where, the goal being that they could get better services, that they could actually get that launching pad that they need, this foundation to go on to live happy, healthy, productive, prosperous lives. And It's also something that was taken up by the state legislature. The entirety is called the STAR program. The entire STAR program has been revamped to better address the needs of troubled youths in the state of Connecticut. I mean, I get so excited talking about it because this is what our reporters do every single day, is they put together these stories. And it's not just, yes, this is a horrible situation, but what really made it stand out, and the reason that it has won multiple awards now, is because it was compassionate and human. And to your point, what you said earlier, Mark went out there and spoke with people in the town. He didn't just rip off a press release and say, all right, here we go, let's get going. He really took the time to focus on journalism by humans for humans. And I'm just so tremendously grateful for his approach and our whole team's approach, because you can see the human positive impact that it has.
Right. And I think, somebody who is often critical of government programs, personally myself, I, so often we see people saying like, oh, well, you just don't want to help people. Like, you're so selfish, right? Government is out there to help people.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like, you need that accountability measure. And it's so hard for regular people just living in the town. I live here in Stamford, so it's a much bigger place than Harwinton. But there's a lot of suffering that you see just around on the street. And I wish I could help more, but at the same time, I also feel like I pay a lot of taxes. Like, I know there's all sorts of social services that I'm supposed to be supporting, and I don't really know what else I can do. And sometimes it's hard in your day-to-day lives to actually know how to hold people accountable. And so that's why I think having a free press and free people out there able to do this work, it's so important. It's like very much a part of, like, as much as I want to talk about like free market capitalism, like, yeah, I also want to talk about like free people doing good things and compassionate things to lift each other up and help each other. It's like, it's not like I just want to like leave people suffering in silence.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about two things that we come across pretty frequently, and this is the root of corruption in many cases, is agency delegation. So someone saying, I'm going to pay someone, and as you were talking about Stanford, you pay a lot of taxes. Someone has been delegated this agency to act on your behalf. Are they doing a good job? Are they doing what they said they were going to do? And are they doing it as well, if not better, than you could do alone? How often is that the case? On the other side of that, though, is also diffusion of responsibility, which is, I think, a lot of people write that check. And, this is something that happens as more of a psychology discussion. But if there's a diffusion of responsibility happens when multiple people are responsible for something. So at the end of it, no one ends up being responsible for it. So, those gaps in society and culture, yes, journalism can draw attention to it, but at the end of the day, the role of journalists isn't to get in there and say, hey, here's what needs to be done. Our job is to say, here's what is happening. Here's a measured, responsible, factual approach. Advocacy journalism is becoming more popular. There's no doubt about that. We see it all over the place. You alluded to it. It's on the right. It's on the left. It's everywhere. We try to stay away from that because, I don't think it's the proper role of journalism, but also it's not the most effective way to, if you're going to parachute into a situation, collect some facts, and then be like, no, I'm the expert now. You've really missed a vital human element there. And likely your solutions have some flaws in them. It's just not the job.
Yeah. And so what is like I hear a lot of times there's like journalistic standards that these papers are supposed to be following, but it seems like they're either selectively followed, or we see a lot of these ghost editing. Have you heard of ghost editing, where it's like they change an article, but they don't actually note the change in the correction section, or they change the titles? So what do you espouse as these journalistic standards, and what, as a viewer or a reader of your publication or any publication should I be looking for? Like, how many sources should I expect? Like, or if you're saying something is a fact, how have you verified it? Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, like the ethics and what those standards actually are for people to be critical consumers?
Yeah. So we publish a code of ethics on our website. And I think that's a really important part of good journalistic practice. There's a variety of beliefs about what constitutes good ethics and good practices in journalism. I think it is the best practice to just be upfront about what those are, because there are different audiences, right? I mean, again, advocacy journalism, it's not what we do, but it does have a place. There's a home for people to share their opinions, insert their views, and speak to an audience in a language that they understand. I mean, this is vital because you want to meet people where they are, but that's really hard to do. As soon as you're speaking to more than 5 people, maybe, there needs to be some simplification or change in language, I suppose, to make sure that it is understood by these various audiences. So a published code of ethics for us, integrity, accountability, legal compliance. Oh, you have it up right here. Okay, perfect. So we really try to just lay this out there and say really upfront, here's what you can expect in terms of interacting with us. And we have a practice guide that we have, and I'm not sure that that's on the website, and maybe that's something that we need to consider, but that gets into things like the philosophy of having fun and making sure that your heart is in it, making sure that we have good communication internally, because it's a business, right? Things come up that don't go right, and we still need to be able to deal with those. We do publish corrections. We make a note of those in italics. If it's a spelling mistake or something that I missed in the editing process, I normally won't be like, I changed this from an I to an E, and I put that in the comments. But what I do is I mail someone a thank you t-shirt immediately for catching my mistake. And that way they have a tangible thank you from our team. And I guess really the bottom line is do no harm.
Mm. And so I love that you guys have your code of ethics published out there, that you stand on that. In terms of like, if I'm reading a story and somebody says like, okay, this is a fact, or this is, how many sources do you need to have to like corroborate something? Like if one person tells you, is that enough? Like some nameless researcher, because you see that all the time. Like, and I always see like our researchers said, or somebody in the intelligence industry. And so should I trust that? Or like, and not even talking about Connecticut Inside Investigator necessarily, but just being a critical consumer, like what should I be looking for from other people? And then I would assume that you hold yourselves to that standard at CII.
Yes. First and foremost, one of the practices that we put in from day one is linking to direct sources. I'm sure that you've seen this on news websites. You go in, it says in a recent lawsuit, and it says the word lawsuit is highlighted, but when you click on it, it takes you to a previous article that they've written just to get SEO points. We are willing to sacrifice SEO, again, quality above clicks, right? Where if it says link to a lawsuit, you're getting a link to the complaint. You're getting
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Because I usually have up on like 12 tabs when I'm reading a news article, because I'm like, I gotta go look up this thing since you don't tell me what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the other part of that, though, is there are situations where we'll link to something that says like, a spokesperson in the Lamont administration, or the Department of Environmental Protection, and it just links to the source where we gathered the information, and we are presenting it as not our opinion, not indisputable fact, but here is where we got the information. To a certain extent, I think this is true in any media diet, but everyone should be skeptical of everything, including what we write. We are human beings, by humans for humans, right? We make mistakes. We mess up sometimes. We strive not to. We are paid not to. We work really damn hard not to. But at the same time, we have to earn that trust and credibility over the course of time. I don't expect you to show up to our website and say, Of course, it's CII. They're perfect. No, like challenge us. This is the way that we become better, actually. I love it when someone sends an email and they want to debate something, or I don't like this headline, I don't like this framing. We make fixes, and we also apologize openly when we think that we can do something better. Most of the time, it's because we are facing the same constraints that every other business is: finite time, finite resources, and we miss something. It's rare, but we do own up to it 100% of the time.
Right. And sometimes too, like you just can't know what you can't know. You put out a story, it gets circulation, and then more people come in to add in, but you just didn't have access to them before you wrote the story.
Yeah. There's a great example of that, actually. So Catherine Revelo is one of our investigative reporters, and she has a particular interest in transparency and freedom of information topics. She's done a wonderful job for us looking into those. And one of the stories she recently published was about Connecticut's involvement in interstate prisoner compacts, which initially we found out there was a gentleman who committed a crime in Connecticut, was incarcerated in Connecticut, and then under some questionable circumstances was transferred to Arizona. Okay, that's interesting. What's going on there? I'm definitely, I want to know more about what's going on. We found out the information that we wanted to learn, not from the Freedom of Information Act requests that we put in and requested from the Department of Correction. Those came back heavily redacted. We got it from the attorney who said, in fact, this transfer was not in the best interest, and the DOC redacting things, they say that's for this prisoner's safety and security. This guy needs this attention in order to have his needs met. So we run into that quite a bit where, again, after publication or after we start digging, that's when stuff starts to get interesting. And that's really when we our eyes light up and we get excited about an investigation, is when we can overcome those barriers to transparency. It's a vital part of the work.
Right. And I think, again, it's part of the like what's so good about the work that you do. So often you see a news headline, you hear the original story, but you never get any follow-up, right? How often do you listen to one of these White House press briefings or from the State Department or this or that, and they're like, oh yes, we're looking into that, we're looking into that. But no reporters, or hardly any, ever actually follow up and say, okay, like, so how did that investigation go? What came of it? And then, of course, the FOIA requests are a whole other animal because, sometimes those take a long time to get. And so you have to go to press with what you have, and then you have to like do a follow up. And then, like you said, you have to figure out like, well, this doesn't look like it was redacted properly. So I don't think that's anything like a fault on your side or like an investigation gone wrong. I think that's the sign of like good investigation and being thorough in your work and doing those follow-ups.
I appreciate that. I know our reporters appreciate it too. I think, it's one of the stresses of their job is running up against a wall and running out of, I mean, you must experience this. I mean, you look into a lot of different stuff, and that there's nothing worse than running into the wall of, I've invested so much time and effort and I can't go any further with what I got. It's wild. I'd argue it shouldn't be that way. It's a real problem. We have an article. I'm not going to talk about it because I'm going to make you go read it. But tomorrow morning, we have an article coming out about FOIA stuff that was stuffed into the budget implementer that received bipartisan criticism, but somehow still is likely going to find its way into law through what I would argue, in my personal capacity, is not really means that are on the up and up. It's a problem.
So you guys track a lot of like on the ground stories, human stories, but you guys also are tracking, I guess, like what's going on in the state house. So how do you build relationships with politicians, right? But also maintain your ability to hold them accountable. Because I feel like we see this all the time where we see people, they want to go to the dinners at Mar-a-Lago. And then it's like, okay, Trump did this thing. Why aren't you being critical of him? So how do you strike that proper balance between getting your sources, building those relationships, and then also holding those same exact people to account?
I'll tell you, we're not getting invited to many of those dinners. First and foremost, I mean the more values and morals come first in all cases. But I do think that the politicians that are out there who are willing to stand by their word and are willing to actually take a stand, they respect that. And if they don't, it's still not going to stop us. I think that's one of the things that a lot of journalists forget is they feel like they need to grovel and crawl to get their sources and protect them. I can't tell you how many government agencies I've spoken to who have reached out to us or spoken to us in the course of an interview who have spoken unfavorably of reporters who do that because they don't feel like they're news consumers as well. They're human beings. They happen to be in a government position. And, you know, I always think that that's an important thing to remember is it's just human beings. There's no such thing as an independent collective, right? There's no such thing as Governor Lamont's office is not making decisions. Human beings are making decisions. So I think that people do tend to get a little skeevy if they feel like the journalist they're working with is not on the up and up with good reason. But that's really our approach is we're here. We're going to ask these questions. I know for a fact that there are a handful and likely a good bit more of officials that probably start sweating a little bit when they see Inside Investigator in their inbox or showing up on their caller ID. But I think that's healthy because we're always going to do it with kindness. We're always going to do it with compassion. We're always going to have that human mentality in mind. But we're going to get that story. We're going to get that information. If it takes us a week, a month, or a year, doesn't matter. It's coming out. The truth has a way of doing that no matter what. We're just facilitators in bringing the truth downstream and out into the ocean of the public.
Nice. It's good to hear that it doesn't have to be that way where you know, you don't have to and, you know, even just the politicians too, like there's so many other people that work in government that, like you said, they're just good people. It's, you know, sometimes it's just a job for them, or sometimes they like got into it because they were super idealistic and want to make changes. And so if you don't have an outlet or a media that you can turn to, that you can count on to actually like tell the story, then you feel trapped too. And then I feel like you can get bought into the system. Whereas like if you have this release valve, like you can give information about actually what's going on, then it probably helps them do their job better as well. And they don't always, I guess, have to be the face of a story or in a story. They can just say, hey, this is what's going on with this legislation. You should look here.
Absolutely. Yeah. You also saw on that code of ethics confidentiality. That's a really important thing for everyone to know about our work. We are protected not only by the First Amendment, but by our own moral code and also Connecticut's Reporter Shield Law, which means we love whistleblowers. Even if someone comes to us with information that was obtained illegally, so video recordings, audio recordings, Connecticut's a two-party state, so maybe you didn't follow that, but you got something that's pretty darn important that needs to be known. We protect our sources. We take care of people because our pursuit is in the name of truth. And that's, I guess I'm just bringing it up because I think that anytime I can mention that and make sure that there's a whistleblower out there who's likely going to sleep a little bit scared, they deserve to know that there's someone in their corner who cares and is willing to do the job right.
Okay, so I didn't know that. I didn't know that if there, even if it's a two-party state, say you record something, regardless, you can leak it to the media. The media can also give it, even though like it's technically illegal. Or is there, and can you talk about that and maybe if there's any other sort of gray areas in that realm?
Yeah. So the one thing that I'll say is it does not release you from liability as the tipster, right?
Okay.
So if you know, there's still a chance that you could submit information and then you are the only person that was in the room in this recording. Right. So it gets published and the person says, dude, I was talking to you. Of course, I know this is you. I know that I was recorded. This is a problem. But again, there are situations where we can avoid that. And I think, you think of someone who has a trove of documents, for example, or security camera footage, right? With the election stuff. I'm always wondering the ballot stuffing thing. Very curious that they, why would you leak it to a campaign where you're not protected when you could leak it to a newsroom and probably keep your job as a result, or be at least a little bit more protected in that.
Right. And it could just be like a corroborating thing for you too, like to know that this person is legit, and then you can find other evidence without maybe giving them
Absolutely.
away, right?
100%. Yeah. And we do, a number of our stories, we deal with some pretty heavy topics like physical and sexual abuse in higher education, where we use pseudonyms, so we protect people's identities even in those cases. Obviously, I think something that we do receive is someone says, I'm submitting this anonymously. Here's my story. We still need to know who you are. We need to do our due diligence. You're not anonymous from the reporters and the newsroom that you're working with. We're just extending a courtesy to say that we're not going to share your personal information, because that can get difficult in your community, in your town, in your state, or heck, sometimes in personal relationships or even at work, that can get really tough.
And so how is it mostly people sending in tips to you, or how do you come across a story, for example, the shelter situation in Harwinton, or about a prisoner? I mean, he's locked away. How would you guys even be aware of some of these issues?
Tips.
Okay.
A huge way that we do it. Like we are constantly submitting Freedom of Information Act requests. Connecticut, the law is not very friendly. I lived in Pennsylvania for a number of years, and 13 years, and they were required to get you an answer within 30 days. In Connecticut, we have stuff that's been outstanding for 2 years. It's not a system that's friendly to transparency in that front. So tips are a really big part of our business. That being said, we get somewhere between 5 and 12 tips a day. I mean, we are getting a lot of people reaching out to us. And, that number just continues to increase. And,
right. As you gain more viewership, right? People will be like, oh,
and I'd like to think it's as a result of people being able to read a story like the DCF, funded shelter, or, read about something as heavy as physical or sexual abuse and understand, holy cow, they actually told this story without destroying someone's life. There is a level of humanity and compassion in journalism, or there can be that reality. We're happy to provide that. And I mean, that's something we screen for in our interview process as well. We recently brought a new reporter on board, Brandon. And, I've just been so impressed with his ability to dig into the details, but also do so in such a way that makes you feel like you're in the room with the people who he was speaking to. It's a unique talent, but it's absolutely essential, in my opinion, for good journalism that makes a difference.
And so how do you do your distribution? You're like fully digital, and you're like mostly written stuff, or how do you like build up an actual audience from nothing?
Yeah, from nothing, I guess, is really the key phrase there, right? So April 20th, 2022, we have 0 subscribers, and I think our stories, we just crossed over 34 million impressions on our stories. So that feels really good. But as you said, we're 100% digital. We launched kind of right at the tail end of COVID, and as a result, we work entirely remotely. Our digital director lives in Chicago because he's tremendously talented, and we wanted to cast a nationwide search for digital talent. For example, our reporters, though, live in Connecticut, work in Connecticut, because we really feel strongly that we need to have that connection. So we distribute on every single social media platform that we can get our hands on and claim space in. And we also are really trying to push people to our website, though, because we recognize the average Connecticut citizen probably isn't sitting down on a Tuesday morning and reading a 6,000 word investigation yet. We want to inspire this because, again, informed, educated, news is in many ways, media is treated as entertainment. we make the TikToks, we send out the tweets, we have the clever graphics, we have an amazingly talented team, but it's all directed toward the website where people can actually get that full understanding. And I'm optimistic we can do it because quality wins out in the end.
Yeah, and so I know when I was over on your website showing off some of your articles, the join the mailing list popped right up.
Yes.
So I would encourage people to go over to insideinvestigator.org and it will automatically prompt you to join the mailing list. And so what do you like when a story comes out, do you do the mailing list? Is like a weekly roundup? What would people expect when they sign up for your mailing list? And again, like you said, a lot of times in the middle of the week it's hard, but maybe on a Saturday morning they can read. So how do you keep it in this day of like shorts and TikToks and flipping from one piece of content to another? Like how do you really break through and keep your audience there?
Well, man, all right. So 2 separate questions. Let me start with trust. We will never sell your email address, and we will not spam your inbox. We send 2 emails a week, and occasionally I'll send we're a nonprofit, so I do send out requests for support, and that's part of our business. It's a really important part of our business. I like our reporters. I would like to keep them employed, please. So we send out emails Wednesday morning and Sunday morning. That's it. In those emails, though, is every story from the last period of time since the last email. So you could go in and scroll through. Obviously, I'd love it if you were going to insideinvestigator.org every day as part of your normal digital diet. But I understand. In fact, I'm okay and enthusiastic. If we just had all of our traffic on Wednesdays and Sundays, I'd be happy. Because that means that people are getting the information they need. And the reality is that most breaking news is the murder type stuff that we talked about before. It's not value added. You're also seeing on your screen right now something really important, which is our podcast, which is also available on YouTube in a video format as well. So.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to say. And it looks like you have a podcast as well, in addition to the written stuff. And what do you guys do there? You guys like go through your stories from the week, or do you do additional stories or different stories over there?
We try to go deeper on just a few stories. So normally a max of 3. We try to keep this 25 minutes or less. I think we might even move to just 2. But this is 1 episode every other week, where I'm sitting down and asking reporters, what is this story about? And then a lot of times what we're getting into is their experience writing it, or their frustrations, or the barriers that they ran into. It's also just fun. I feel like it's a chance to actually show that our journalists are human beings, not like staff writer. Right. It's Mark, it's Catherine, it's Trisha, it's Brandon. Like, these are real human beings who are doing this work. Get to know them a little bit. It turns out they're pretty wonderful.
Yeah, and also connects back to that code of ethics too, when you can really understand how a person approaches a story and what they put into it. It adds a whole other dynamic to it, versus, again, a lot of these stories, they're just churned out so quickly. They're very formatted or just based off of a press release. And yeah, it's hard to know really why they did the story or what they were thinking, and you end up projecting your own biases and understandings onto things. It's always the most obvious when you know an issue really well. So like during COVID, like I was going out in New York City and I knew the mandate stuff really well. I knew the open school stuff really well, and those things would hit the headlines, and I'm like, these people don't know what they're talking about. They have some of their basic facts wrong, and just like the whole framing is off. So it's really interesting to see that. And I think that's actually what's so special about the new media, is that it's not just about the name of the publication. It's about the people and those personalities and who they are. And yeah, so I think that, again, long term, this is the type of thing that's going to pay off. It doesn't always, not every story is going to hit with every person, But when you do have those personalities, like, I don't know, it just adds so much more. Again, it's like the human element of it, not just some corporation spinning out a narrative.
Yeah. Trust matters. Listen, news impacts real human lives. Journalism absolutely impacts real human lives. So if trust isn't there, man, that gets really tough.
Right.
If you can't trust anyone, you're going to be underinformed or less informed because you're going to be getting your news from the neighbor, and God only knows what their opinions are inserted in there. We need places we can go that we can trust. And obviously recognizing that so many newspapers have gone out of business, we want to create our next competitor. We want to help other newsrooms thrive. That's a huge part of what we do, is just try to, every single story that we write, by the way, is published under Creative Commons license, which means anybody can take it for free and use it. Put it in your newspaper, put it in, that DCF story, the Republican American ran that, the local paper ran that, just take it, go for it.
Yeah. What is that like? So obviously there's not going to be maybe some publications that aren't so happy. Like, I know, we have the Stanford Advocate, which is like Hearst Media Publications, which is like not such a, in my opinion,
they're tied up in bureaucracy as well.
Right.
Like, with their editorial teams, and I've had members of them, I won't say any names, but I've had their team members say, we just can't do it. It's not the way that our structure works, which is, in my opinion, it's not the point of journalism.
Right. So has your reception been among these more established, legacy media places? Have they been giving you a hard time? Is there like, any, I don't know, because sometimes I feel like when there's a new person on the block trying to do something tried and true, you get called names. I've been called a few names in my day.
I believe it. It's tough. And I feel like it's tougher in the new media space than it is in the traditional media space, because every editor who I've spoken to, I have a spreadsheet. It's called the, republication partnerships. And I have a list of every single editor and every single phone number, because I want to know these people, because I genuinely want to help them. And I think that that's the difference. If we can call, and every person I've reached out to, they've been delightful. They've told me, they've given me tips. They've given me, I'm not a career journalism guy. I happen to work on First Amendment and corruption issues previously. And like I said, I get to make the trains run on time. But these folks have provided invaluable advice. They've taken our stories, they've republished them, they've been excited. They send us tips, because the other thing to keep in mind is, these issues that happen locally, these guys are oftentimes limited by a physical printed product, and they can only put in so many words,
Right.
6,500 words on a deep dive. That's just not going to happen. So in my opinion, all of those folks understand we're all in this together. We all want Connecticut to be more informed and educated. And we can.
That's interesting. So they feel like, okay, well, if they can push the market this way, maybe they can loosen up some of those bureaucratic red tape that's around them, and maybe get to do more of the stuff that, because it's like being a teacher. I getting into a teacher, there's some people who probably do it just because it's like summers off and good paid. But I would say the vast majority of teachers get into it because they really want to give back and teach kids, and they think that it's a way that we can change society for the better. And then of course you're in there and the system beats you down, and after whatever the period of time is, most teachers are just ending up clocking in and clocking out. And I can imagine if you're in one of these legacy media places, it can probably be the same way, right? You get in there, you start, you're like all optimistic about what you can do in journalism, and then the system just sort of beats you down. So I guess I was thinking that they would want to also hold you back, but I can see how you're saying no, they actually see this as an opportunity to maybe get back to doing what they got into the business to do. So that's good to hear. You love to hear it.
I'm all about the silver lining. I believe that there is an opportunity here. I believe that good can be done. And the teacher example is a really solid one, because I see that and I feel that. And it's very, very similar, right? People get burned down and beat up, and at the end of the day, they are, you know, it is a job. It is a job, and that's what we gotta remember. You know, you can't not pay attention to your kids because you got something to do at work. But we want to strike that balance, and we want to inspire other people to strike that balance as well. Because if reporters are happy and healthy and passionate about what they're doing, they're going to create quality, and that's going to have a ripple effect outwards in our communities of people being more informed and educated, and frankly, happier. And that's something that I don't think we can discount as part of this job, is bringing forth not just the doom and gloom stories, but the stories of people who have triumphed over the obstacles that they've encountered.
And also just proximity, right? When you're reading about things in your neighborhood that you walk out and you experience every day. I definitely noticed this getting involved in local politics versus like paying attention to the presidential politics. It's maddening, you know, they're just characters on your screen. And, you know, it's like, oh, you know, the Democrats suck, the Republicans suck, or whatever. But when I get involved into local politics, I'll be with people who, like, on the national scene, we seem to have a lot of disagreements, you know, like, but then all of a sudden we start talking about local politics, and I'm like, wait, we basically agree on all this local politics stuff. And it's very like grounding, you know, like embodying, like you're actually having a lived experience rather than just in some I don't know, like narrative that's, you don't know what's real and what's fake, like we said at the beginning. So as we're wrapping up here, you said you got a big story coming out tomorrow on the FOIA stuff. Is there any other stories that you should be looking out for? Is there like any stories that you might need tips on, like any areas that you're looking for tips on? Let us know about that.
Well, I'll say this. So 4 out of every 5 Sundays, we're releasing a new investigation. So there is new investigative content coming out frequently. I will say the next couple weeks here, we have some silver lining stuff that I'm really excited to share. It's some optimistic, feel good, interesting, funky things that are going on in Connecticut. So obviously, of course, give us your email address and we'll send them to you for free. And then in terms of tipsters, our mission, as I mentioned at the beginning, is to root out corruption in the state of Connecticut. So corruption is a broad phrase. It doesn't necessarily just mean, you know, someone stole money or is you know, something as simple as that. It comes in many forms. But what I would be interested in knowing from your viewers and your listeners is what's impacting you in your life. We get a lot of tips of people saying, have you looked into this thing that's happening in Washington, D.C. or in Hartford? Maybe we will. What can you tell us about it, though? And why does it actually matter in your life? I think that's the part that a lot of people miss, is they're just throwing stuff at a wall. And the best tipsters are the ones who know an issue and are really looking for a partner who can help them tell that story and explore and verify and show the broader picture through the vehicle of that story. So I would love to hear from people, again, because the worst case scenario is I get to talk to an amazing human being who maybe we can help or at least point in the right direction. If we can't help, I will try to make a referral to someone else who can.
And I have your website linked right in the description down below. And you can go there, join the mailing list. I'm sure you have all your socials connected there. I know personally for me, it always helps when I see it up on my social media feed. I'm like, yes, okay, now I can click over to the thing and, you know.
Listen, if you've watched this far on this channel, hit subscribe on our YouTube. It's the channel that is probably the least successful. I think our last episode hit like 32,000 people, and like 10 of them were on YouTube. So it's a platform that, because it's so expensive to gain an audience there, any organic growth would be wonderful too. You get to see our beautiful shining faces talk about these articles and they are really well-designed videos as well by Joe, our digital director.
All right, so I'll add in your YouTube channel link down there after we get off of here for people. Make sure you subscribe over there. Let's help get Connecticut Inside Investigator past that 1,000 subscriber mark and get the views going over there, because I really do appreciate the work you guys are doing. Like I said, I'm always trying to balance keeping track of what are the national trending news, but also like, this is where I live, this is where my experience is, and I'm always looking for that thing that's like, yes, like pulling me back in, and you guys do that for me. And like I said, it's the human aspect, so I appreciate it. Keep up the hard work, keep up the good stuff, and thank you to everybody out there who's checking in. Again, if you haven't, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you subscribe to me, make sure you subscribe to Connecticut Investigator, and check out all the great work they're doing. And until next time, think free, live free, and give all the glory to God.